Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. I guess I'm having too much fun already. I'm already having too much fun here. I'm so happy to be back here. Thank you for being here and making it possible for us to get to do this. We love it when you are here. And we got a great show for you. Second hour, we haven't talked with Father Tad for a good long while. Father Tad Pacholczyk will be our guest the second hour. And we'll do bioethics. If you have bioethics questions or you just want to hear about the latest kind of moral implications of what's going on in the bioethics field, like to get some insights into what's actually being done by the science and how we can think morally about what's being done with the science. That's for the second hour. First hour, a man of faith, a man of courage, someone I truly admire. I just want you to know that. Truly admire. Trent Horn, who is the host of Council of Trent, which you can find at TrentHornPodcast.com. But also, the most important thing about Trent, married to an extremely funny person who's been posting all sorts of hilarity on the web. And I say that mostly because I don't want her to turn her humor against me. I am trying to foster a good feeling so I don't become the target of one of her videos. Welcome, Trent.
Well, Cy,
I'm scared of her.
When my wife chooses to imitate people on her YouTube channel, it is a sign that person is a Catholic celebrity.
Yeah. Okay. So then I'm safe. I appreciate that. I'm safe from that. But I saw the stuff she did about Matt Fradd, and obviously she doesn't like Matt Fradd. That came across quite clearly that she does not like him at all.
Oh, clearly. I think what came across clearly is that she loves Matt Fradd and definitely enjoys Pints with Aquinas. It's just funny. It's like, I wonder when we'll be talking about Aquinas at some point. I love Pints now, but the channel's aim has evolved over time. So she just made a little playful rib on that. But Matt still puts out, of course, wonderful content. Yeah. It's just funny to see how it's developed over time.
The number here is 888-318-7884. This hour we'll do tips for defending the faith with Trent Horn. 888-318-7884. If you want to see what kind of tomfoolery they're producing in the Trent household. Wait, it just went out of my head.
Too Far with Laura Horn.
Oh, Too Far. Yeah, Too Far with Laura Horn is where to go. Too Far with Laura Horn. We already got a bunch of folks on the line. You got anything you want to talk about before we take the calls, or you want to just take the calls?
No, we can jump right in.
All right, we'll go to Wheaton, Illinois then, where Noah is on the line. Noah watching on YouTube. Glad you're here, Noah. Go ahead with your question for Trent.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call. So I watched your video called Matt Walsh, James White, and the Fear of Evangelism recently. And there's a clip that you cited in that video on the Council of Trent where James White debates the TV show host, and the TV show host cites the example of people with ovotestes or just certain ambiguous genitalia like that he used as evidence for transgenderism, or rather that it's that male and female is not the only categories that we should put people in. And I know you've mentioned that many intersex people are the majority. It's pretty easy to tell what sex they are. I'm just wondering, like, specifically in that instance, like of ovotestes or any other circumstance that would be more ambiguous, or it's kind of one or the other, or both even. How do you how do you go about justifying either saying they're male or female in those circumstances, and how would you use that? How would you defend that in saying that we are all male and female even in those with those circumstances?
Sure. So the argument seems to be that people will make is that there is not a strict binary in sexual identity between male and female, because there might be cases where it's difficult for us to determine whether someone is male or female. These are there's two subsets. So there's these we call intersex cases. And as you noted, I would say in the vast majority of these cases, we are able to determine whether the person is male or female. They usually just have stunted sexual development or sexual organs that have not fully developed, but you can determine whether they're male or female. Before I get into answering that, though, I will say that this particular objection, I would say that it does not defend the transgender. It does not defend transgender ideology. Let's say there were individuals who we could not determine their biological sex. It would not follow that the norm for biological sex is to be male or female. That wouldn't follow from these isolated cases where we're not sure. To give another example, there are cases of people who have severe brain damage where we're not sure if they're alive or dead. They're not responsive, but their bodies, their brain may be dead, but their bodies are still regulating, engaging in homeostasis. So these are very, very rare cases, and I call them inter-life cases. But the fact that you have these very rare brain injury cases where you're not sure if the person is alive or dead, that wouldn't follow. We know there's a biological binary between life and death. So the fact that there are these cases where we're not sure, I would say that they don't show, for example, that maleness and femaleness, or being a man or a woman, is not solely, it's biological. Now, people might have different psychological conditions, different social customs surrounding being male or female, but at the end of the day, being a man or a woman is connected to biological reality, and we are organisms that reproduce sexually. Like other organisms across all different kinds of species that reproduce sexually, that you can see the male-female binary there. Now, in the cases where we're not sure, I would say that I haven't done a deep dive into the therapeutics and the other medical treatments for intersex condition. I'm familiar with some where we can identify. Normally, we would look at someone's chromosomes, and usually I would say that the presence of a Y chromosome, not always, but usually, is a good indicator that someone is male. So we have Klinefelter syndrome, are men that have more feminine features, they're XXY. So I would say it's a combination. I think heavyweight would be given to genotypes and chromosomes, and then you would just do a holistic analysis of the person's hormones, skeletal structure, genetics, sexual organ development. And you would assign weight to things based on their normative development in human anatomy. Well, like I said, I don't have a comprehensive approach medically how one would do that in the extremely hard cases. And I'm familiar with very, very unusual cases where we're not sure. But as I would say, the fact that there may be some of these cases where we're not sure, that doesn't disprove the existence of a binary between male and female. I actually have posed this question to Father Tad Paholchek before at the National Catholic Bioethics Center, and they have some more resources on the subject that can deal with the specific diagnosis of those who identify as intersex. But what's important, and what I commended James White for in my episode, was that he was right in that episode when the host wanted to talk about intersex, that this does not have anything to do with transgender identity, because 99% of people who identify as transgender do not identify as intersex. Their biological sex is easily determined. And so I hope that's helpful for you, and I'd recommend for you and our other listeners, check out the National Catholic Bioethics Center, ncbcenter.org. They have some more resources on the subject.
Thanks, Noah. That brings us to our break. We'll take a break. Trent Horn is our guest. You're welcome to call with your questions. Tips for defending the faith today, 888-318-7884.
Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
One time somebody said to me, "Why don't you air these people?" And I said, "No, because I don't think they're Catholic." He says, "By what right do you have to say that?" I said, "I own the network."
Mother Angelica Live Classics. Every morning, 2 Eastern, on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Tips for defending the faith this hour with Trent Horn. Your call's welcome. 888-318-7884. It's December deal days here at shop.catholic.com. You can use the promo code MyDeal22 to save an extra 20% off, even when you buy already discounted stuff, and everything's discounted over there. So use MyDeal22 when you shop at shop.catholic.com for your Christmas stuff, and you get an extra 20% off. And pretty much, there's also this other side of it. If your purchase goes over $75, your shipping costs are free. That's for U.S. customers only. It's some kind of I don't know, anti-internationalist thing we're doing. It's only for U.S. customers, the free shipping. Go to shop.catholic.com. Shop.catholic.com. Maybe it's not anti-internationalist. Maybe it's just because it costs a lot to mail outside the U.S. What do you think, Darren? Darren thinks it's the latter. All right. Trent, lots of folks on the line. You ready?
Yeah, let's see where would you like to go with.
You literally
I had a moment.
sound like you are not ready. That was the most contradictory. Yeah, I'm ready, because it sounded completely not ready. All right, we're going to Tennessee. John in Tennessee, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. John, thanks for downloading the app onto your phone. Go ahead and ask Trent your question.
Okay. Hey, guys. Hope you're doing well today. Trent, I just want to say I'm very grateful for all the work that you do. I'm looking forward to seeing your discussion on Sola Scriptura later on in March. My question for you is, I know that the Church teaches that Jesus is fully present under both species of the Eucharist. And so, in situations like COVID, where the chalice was unavailable, the host was the only avenue. And so I was wondering what the logic or the reasoning was behind the Church's teaching on this.
Behind the teaching of the Eucharist being presented under both species? I want to make sure I understand your question.
No, I'm sorry. That Jesus is fully present in each individual host.
Oh, right. Well, the idea that, so you're saying that contrary to the idea that when we receive Christ in the sacrament, okay, so the idea is, so when we receive Jesus in the Eucharist, we receive Jesus's whole and entire body, blood, soul, and divinity, right? So the Church would teach that we would receive that rather than having Christ's body broken or divided in some kind of way. And I think a lot of the reasoning that would go related to that, like if we go back to St. Thomas Aquinas in the Summa Theologia, he talks about how Christ is present in the Eucharist, but not present in the same way that a body is present in space, with some kind of a strict three-dimensional restriction. Okay, so the fact that Jesus is sacramentally present, though real, and we have popes refer to Jesus being physically present in the Eucharist, we just have to be careful with the use of the words physical to not mean that Christ is present under the accidents, for example, of bread and wine, because the accidents of bread and wine still remain. He's present substantially. It's in a physical way, but not in accord with physics, how you or I understand it, like Newtonian physics here in the world around us. So I would say that it would go back to that understanding, like what Aquinas says about Jesus being sacramentally present, though real and substantially present. And through that mystery of the Eucharist, we are able to fully receive Christ's body, his glorified body given to us. It doesn't have to be divided or partitioned in any way. So I hope that was helpful for you. And yeah, if you ever have any other further questions on that or other subjects, definitely give us a call back.
Thanks, John. Thank you very much. All the lines full now, so off to Honolulu we go. Matt in Honolulu, Hawaii, listening on Catholic.com. What's it, like about 1:15 in the afternoon in Honolulu? No. 12:15.
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, 1:15. Okay. Well, very good. Now you had lunch and now you're calling Trent.
Right. Thank you for taking my question. So I've always been interested in the contemplative, mystical aspects of the Catholic religion. Cradle Catholic. Earlier in life, I've even discerned to be a Trappist monk, but wasn't ready for it at that time. And now that I'm married for 5 years and we're contemplating having children, do you think it's still possible to live a contemplative life and seek like mystical experiences while working a full-time job, marriage, children, or they're kind of contradict each other?
No, I don't think that they're contradictory, but I do think it's going to be more difficult to lead a strictly contemplative life and seek mystical experiences with God when one is married. And this goes all the way back to apostolic times, as St. Paul notices this. He talks about it in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, where he says that, if you marry, you do well. And however, he says that those who do not marry, he wishes all like him, he wishes all could be like him. Paul talks about how the unmarried man is anxious to please the Lord, but the married man is anxious to please his wife. And being someone who, coming up here in a few months, is celebrating his 10th wedding anniversary, I could say that's very true, that you have a vocation. When you are married, you form a domestic church. So this is something that you have to oversee. And the duties that are involved in that can make it very difficult to seek out a lot of time for contemplation. Many of the greatest mystics in the church's history, think about the ascetics. They just go off into the desert and spend all of their time in prayer. That is not something that is going to be available to most married people, and you probably shouldn't do that, or at least you shouldn't. You should always find time to yourself for prayer, but lengthy times in prayer and contemplation can hinder your ability to spend time with your family, to work, to develop your relationships with your wife and your children. But I do think there's opportunities to at least you should seek contemplative times to go just to be at an adoration chapel or to spend personal time in prayer. Because if you don't do any of that, you're not going to serve your vocation well at all. Other things that you can do is you can consider joining a secular order. So I believe, for example, that Third Order Franciscans are often comprised of married individuals, and so they're able to enter into religious life. It's not a vowed religious life, as far as I understand, but it's a way to formally put oneself in a situation where you can be more open to have these prayerful experiences in a spiritual life that lead one open to the life of contemplation. But what's wonderful about our faith is that you can be a saint and you can be married. Saint Therese of Lisieux's parents, Zélie and Louis Martin, for example, are a wonderful example of that. So that might be, I would say, is seek contemplation, just the little bits of time where you can, and it will grow over time, especially when you cut out the less important things that tend to distract us. Because honestly, you could be an unmarried person and be distracted by the world and be unable to lead a contemplative life. A lot of it rests within ourselves, but also to not say, oh, well, I don't want to do Lectio Divina, I don't want to go to adoration because I'm not going to have these experiences that a mystic would who spends all their time in prayer. No, you might not, but you'll have experiences that are fitting for your state in life, and those are good and beautiful to behold, so why wouldn't we seek them out? And they are gifts of God. They're not things that we earn by praying really hard. They're gifts from us entering into that intimate communion with God. And all of us should do that, whether we are married, religious life, ordained, or still discerning. Is that helpful, Matt?
Yeah, that's a great answer. Just one more. Can you think of any examples of like married mystics, or would that be Saint Therese's parents or anyone else?
Jacques
I don't know.
maybe.
Jacques Maritain?
Yeah.
Maritain?
Yeah. Maybe he and his wife were, at least they seem quite mystic to me, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that one off the top of my head. Married people who at least had mystical experiences. I know wonderful married authors, theologians, who have done tremendous good for the church that any married couple should emulate. Alice and Dietrich von Hildebrand, for example, would be one that instantly come to mind for myself up in more of the modern era. But yeah, otherwise, if you know any, definitely pass them along my way. But thanks for calling.
Matt, since you're here, can I ask you a question?
Oh, absolutely.
Do you know anything about Oahu Catholic Radio?
I have not. I've heard that it's supposed to be coming.
Yeah, they're working on it. A bunch of people here in San Diego are participating in that. Some folks we know who started some radio stations here. And I just want to let people know, if you're listening in Hawaii, you can go to OahuCatholicRadio.com. You can find out the effort to bring a big radio station to the big city in Hawaii, there in Oahu. So, Matt, check it out. I think they had an article in your diocesan newspaper recently as well. But I hope there'll be people that will support that effort, because, boy, it would be wonderful to have a Catholic radio station there. Okay, Matt?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Peace, brother. That was totally self-serving, Trent, because I want, like, when they do their fundraisers, to get invited over to Oahu. I'm just trying to get a station on the air so that I can get invited over there. It's
what
a
if they
scam.
invite
It's a
you,
whole
Si?
scam that I'm doing. Yeah, go ahead.
What if you get there and they say, Si, we're so glad that you're here. Here is your schedule. And it's like from dawn until 11 p.m., you're just in a radio booth just doing fundraising.
I don't care. I'll be in Hawaii. I don't even care. I don't even care at all. No.
Rather be in an office building in Hawaii.
Right.
I mean,
it's like a bad day fishing is better than a good day at work. Yeah, a bad day
you live in San Diego. That's the Hawaii of the contiguous United States. So
well, thank you very much. I take that as a compliment. But I think that might actually be Miami. But yeah, I'd rather be in Hawaii. All things considered, I'd rather be in Hawaii.
If they ever need anyone else to go along with you to handle a few apologetic questions, I might have some freedom in my schedule. So I'm happy to join you.
Darren never wants to travel, and I bet he'd be like, "Let's go over there and do the radio show over there. I'll set it up for you. We'll do the radio show. Me and the 5 kids, Rena, we'll all come over with you." Len in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM satellite radio. You are next, Len. Go ahead with your question for Trent.
Hi there. So my son asked this question, and I'm hoping you can give him a better answer than I did. So we're starting with the understanding and the premise that prior to the fall, Adam and Eve were perfect and sinless, and therefore, by definition, they exercised perfect judgment. And so the question he had was, if they were perfect and exercised perfect judgment, how is it that they committed misjudgment by falling to Satan?
Right. So to clear this up, I would say that Adam and Eve were sinless. They did not have concupiscence, for example. They did not have an innate attachment or direction to sin like you and I have. So if you think of concupiscence, it's sort of like, imagine a car with a warped axle. If you don't correct the wheel at all, the car will always slightly veer off the road if you don't do anything. Because we are conceived of the original sin, and those effects still remain, if we do nothing to correct those inclinations, we will end up in sin. But Adam and Eve weren't like that. They had axles that were perfectly straight. However, one could still voluntarily turn the wheels and drive off of the road, which is what happened with Adam and Eve. So it wasn't like that they were created in a condition where they were incapable of sinning. Rather, they did not have these inclinations to sin. They were given preternatural gifts of wisdom and understanding and friendship with God, but they were not omniscient. They were not perfect. It depends what you mean by perfect. There's some things about them that represented perfections, but they were not perfect beings because they were still limited, for example. And because they have free will, they're tempted to particular sins. Now, they would not have been tempted to sins of the flesh like you or I because they lacked concupiscence. So what Aquinas says is that Adam and Eve would have been tempted by the sins of the sins that tempted the angels. So your son's objection, what's interesting here, is that it actually has more force if we swap out Adam and Eve and we put Satan in there. Right? If God created Lucifer, he created became Satan, creates Lucifer, the devil, who is an angelic being, highly intelligent, doesn't even have a body to have bodily desires, right? Angels can't be tempted by bodily passions. Why would the devil sin? And the general conclusion there is that it would be a sin of the intellect, allowing the intellect to engage in faulty reasoning so that one loves something of this world rather than God. And the primary intellectual fault would probably be pride. Just as the devil succumbed to his own pride, Adam and Eve did the same, thinking that they knew better than what God was telling them. So they were sinless, but they were not perfect in the sense that God is perfect, because they're limited creatures capable of making errors or capable of exercising free will to engage in a kind of intellectual sin like pride or something like that. So that's probably how I would go about looking at the question. Is that helpful?
Len? Are you there with us, Len?
I hope he didn't drive his car off the road.
No, he didn't. He didn't drive.
No.
You're still okay, Len. Okay, good.
Still okay. Thank you.
All right.
He's got a good axle and a good handle on the wheels. That's good to hear.
All right, well, you can hear the music playing. We got to take a quick break. Trent Horn with us this hour. Next hour, Father Tad is back. Father Tad Boholchik from the National Catholic Bioethics Center to talk about bioethics. Your call welcome this hour if you've want a tip for defending the faith. 888-318-7884.
Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com. Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. I'm not mentally here for the program anymore. I'm just thinking about Hawaii now. I just got Hawaii on the brain. They got a station in Kona, Hawaii. Did you know that? On the Big Island. But I don't know if they got stations there. Oh, there used to be a station on Maui, but I don't know if there's still a station on Maui. But
did it get overrun by all the lava? Is it just like?
Oh, the lava's not in Maui. Yeah, no. You mean on the Big Island? Yeah. No, I don't think so. Although there is some kind of highway that's being threatened by a volcano. I don't really want to live somewhere where stuff gets threatened by volcanoes. I got to rethink this. But they don't. I think you're safe in Oahu.
You live in California. It's basically just a volcano that doesn't let anything come up from under the earth, like with earthquakes.
Well, yeah, okay, but say someone said to you, "Hey, I could shake you really hard, or I could pour this hot lava all over you. Which would you choose?"
I guess I wonder how hard they're shaking me and how hot the lava is, but fair enough.
Lava's very hot.
It's a fair distinction there.
888-318-7884. Cora Evans was a married mystic. Her name has been submitted for canonization. I have no idea where that information came from. Someone just put it on the sheet here, so I thought I'd say that. Do you know her? You ever met her?
I do not. I'm not familiar with her, so it's something to look into.
The number's 888-318-7884. We got Trent Horn here with us. If you got a question for Trent about how to defend the Catholic faith, maybe you even, some aspect of the Catholic faith, like belief in God, for example. Or Trent's really good at that. He wrote Answering Atheism, a very fine book. 888-318-7884. Going to Aaron in Hastings, Michigan now. watching on YouTube. Aaron, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Trent.
Hi, Trent. Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Oh, happy to.
Yeah, the question I had, how do we prove that Mary was always a virgin?
Sure. Well, I would say that when we put forward a theological position, we have to ask, what are our sources of divine revelation? What means does God use to teach us truths about revelation? Okay. So as Catholics, we would believe in kind of a three-pronged approach. We believe in God's word that has been given to us in a written form in sacred scripture and an unwritten form in sacred tradition, and that Christ established an authoritative, enduring church with a teaching office, the magisterium. So the magisterium teaches that Mary always remained a virgin, though most people probably want to say, well, why should I believe that? Are there good reasons to think that? Yeah, I would say that there are. So I think the approach that I might take is, one, to answer defeaters to the claim that Mary was always a virgin, and then two, provide some positive evidence for thinking that Mary remained a virgin and never engaged in sexual relations. Oh, and then three, before I even start, I might ask, why does any of this matter at all? Because some people say, well, what does it matter if Mary was a virgin? Is the church saying sex is bad, so Mary could never have engaged in this? No, that's not what the church is saying. I would say that I would ask a Protestant, why is it important that Mary was a virgin prior to Christ's birth? Why is the virgin birth important? And I think many would say, well, because one, it happened, okay, and then two, because it shows that Christ had no earthly father. The fact that that Jesus did not have any older siblings helps to provide evidence that he is unique. He is the only begotten Son of Mary. It provides evidence for Jesus only having a heavenly father, not an earthly father. He has an adoptive father, but not a biological earthly father. So if that reasoning applies to Jesus not having older siblings, it applies to Jesus not having younger siblings. So Protestants and Catholics agree Jesus doesn't have older siblings. They just disagree about whether there are younger siblings or not. So I would go past the defeaters. So for example, like the Brethren of the Lord, I would show that the word brother does not necessarily have to mean biological brother. It's most often used in the New Testament, adelphos, to refer to adoptive siblings. Like a brother or sister in Christ means God the Father has adopted both of us. That's why we're brothers. We're adoptive siblings. And so you could argue that they are cousins, or you could argue that the Brethren of the Lord are children from Joseph's previous marriage. There's even Protestants who argue for that. Richard Bauckham is a Protestant who he denies the perpetual virginity of Mary, but he argues that the fact that Mark 6:3 refers to Jesus as the son of Mary, which is a full description. Usually you're only referred as the son of your mother if your mother is very famous. But normally he's the son of Joseph unless he's in Nazareth. That would be a sign that Jesus was born from Joseph's second marriage, not his first. Not every Catholic agrees with this view, but you're free to. And I think it's interesting that Bauckham and some other Protestants are very open to it. So one, I would remove the defeaters, right? Those would be the things that say, and there's two kinds of defeaters, undercutting and rebutting. But for simplicity, I'll just say, let's deal with the things that would say Mary is not a virgin, like that the Brethren of the Lord. Okay. And there's others I might go to. I won't get into them here. After that, then I would say, okay, we have no positive evidence to say that Mary failed to remain a virgin. Do we have any evidence for her perpetual virginity? And I might point to a few passages in Scripture at this point. The greeting that Mary gives when the angel Gabriel says to her that you will conceive a child, and she says, how can that be since I know not man? I mean, she was at this point already legally married to Joseph. That's why Joseph was considering divorce. They weren't just engaged. So the fact that they are legally married, that she's going to give birth to a child, that shouldn't be that surprising, unless Mary had already made some kind of a vow of virginity. Now that might seem a bit unusual, but I would then go to the tradition, to the early sources. I would note that the first individuals to challenge the perpetual virginity of Mary come centuries later, and they're a minority among the church fathers. That would be Helvidius and then Tertullian. Tertullian did this after he left the church. And then I would note that amongst this testimony, it goes back pretty early. We have the infancy Gospel of James, dated to the beginning of the 2nd century, that tells the story about Mary being raised as a consecrated virgin in the temple and then being married to Joseph, who was a widower, in order to protect her. And I think there's a lot of good evidence, especially among ancient Eastern sources, that there was this understanding of Mary and Joseph and her perpetual virginity. So I think what I would go there is, clarify the doctrine. I would answer objections to it that try to show Mary engaged in sexual relations. Then I would mount some positive evidence for it from Scripture and then also from tradition, noting that we have this early historical agreement about Mary remaining a virgin fairly early on. So if you would like to go, Aaron, even more in depth on that, I would recommend the book Behold Your Mother by my colleague Tim Staples. He has several chapters just on this question. I also address it in my book, The Case for Catholicism. But that was a lot. Of course, you did ask me to defend a dogma that many Protestants are critical of, so I gave you a lot. Is that at least a helpful start?
Yeah. I used to have the Behold Your Mother, but I don't know what in the world I did with it.
Well, I tell you what, Aaron, let's remedy that. Why don't we send you a copy of Behold Your Mother? If you stay on the line, I will gladly send you a copy.
Hang on. Actually, you know what?
Thank you.
He says he'll send it to you, but Edgar's going to send it to you. So hang on and talk to Edgar. Edgar will get your address. We can send Behold Your Mother to Michigan, right? Yeah, we can mail to Michigan. I know we can.
You can still say it's Si by a relation, as a figure of speech. For example, when it says in Scripture that Pilate flogged Jesus, he didn't do it himself. He had an underling do it.
That's right. So we'll have an underling do it. Excuse me, underling? You send him a book? 888-318-7884, the number.
Maybe underling might be a bit...
no, that's a perfect word for Edgar.
Should we have minion?
Let's put that by on his door. Minion? Maybe minion. How
about a minion? One of our minions will do it.
The world's biggest minion. That's a giant minion in there.
Tell Edgar I would love to see him dress up as a minion for next Halloween.
The thing about this that people may not know, that you and Edgar have physically fought one another. Like you have thrown punches and kicks at one another. And
it was fun. It was a gentleman's Muay Thai kickboxing spar, and perhaps
awesome.
we'll do it again. Maybe we'll do it in the studio next time. We'll do it for the next Catholic Answers Live.
No, well, I don't think he can fight at all until after July, because he's getting married in July. Edgar's got a big wedding coming up, so we have to keep him healthy. We can't have you hurting him.
She can still say no if he.
If you disfigure him in some way. Yeah, I can't. Not with that scar on your cheek. No, she's not going to reject him. I'm just saying we got to keep him healthy till his wedding. Let's go to Nathan in Texas, watching on YouTube. Nathan, go ahead with your question for Trent.
Hey guys, thank you for having me. I'm not a Catholic, but I'm strongly considering converting. But my brother is a Reformed Christian, and we've been. Sorry.
He said, "Oh wow."
Oh, I said, "Oh wow." That's awesome.
Oh yeah, but my brother, he's a Reformed Christian, and we've been having a discussion about salvation through faith alone and not through works and faith. And I was wondering exactly what to point him towards. It seems like I don't have the Bible verses off the top of my head, but it seems like every time I point him towards something, he just says, "Oh well, that's not what they meant," or "This is what they meant." And he's been sending me to RC Sproul and different things like that.
Yeah, sure. Well, what I would recommend here, Nathan, and since we only have a little bit of time for our break, I'd like to get your email address, because I want to send you a book, Jimmy Akin's The Drama of Salvation. But in particular, Jimmy, my colleague, recently wrote an article on faith and works, that when we use that framework, I think that Protestants, there's a lot of opportunity for misunderstanding, that thinking that, to be saved, we have to do a combination of faith and works, and you have to do a certain number of works in order to be saved. And that's not what Catholics believe. We would say we're saved by grace alone, apart from faith or works. For example, when a baby is baptized, the baby doesn't have faith and he doesn't have works. He's saved by grace alone. And then he manifests the fruit of baptismal grace through the gift of faith. And then the only work he or she must do to attain heaven is to not die in a state of mortal sin. And every Christian almost every Christian believes that in order to go to heaven, you just can't do something that would sever your faith in Christ. Even Christians who believe you can't lose your salvation, they would say if somebody became an atheist for the rest of their lives, then you would only prove you were never saved in the first place or something like that. So we're actually much closer together than people realize. Sometimes we just need better language to express it. So I'd like to send you Jimmy's book and the article talking about how the phrase faith and works can be misleading and how we need a better way to reframe the discussion with our Protestant brothers and sisters.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Nathan. What an encouraging call to us. If there's any way we can be helpful to you as you consider coming into full communion with the Catholic Church, call again. Or you can always send us an email to radio@catholic.com. We have an underling who checks that account, radio@catholic.com. I got to take a break, huh? Do I have to take a break, Darren? I got to take a break. All right, I'm going to see you in a couple minutes, Trent. I'm going to just dream about Hawaii for 2 minutes.
Well, let our minions get to work, or our flying monkeys. You could call them that, our flying monkeys.
You can't call him a flying monkey. No, that's now you've messed up my thinking about Hawaii. All right, I got to think about Hawaii. All right, right back. More Catholic Answers Live.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
He is honored by the Church as a saint with the title of the Seraphic Doctor.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
One of the greatest theologians and Franciscan mystics in church history, Bonaventure also wrote a biography of St. Francis that was commissioned by the Franciscans themselves. It took a saint and true mystic to understand a true saint and mystic. He died in 1274.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Our guest, the Wicked Witch of the Midwest, Trent Horn, because that's what you are. You're if you have flying monkeys working for you, you just made yourself into the Wicked Witch of the West.
The Wicked Witch of the Midwest, perhaps.
Yeah, that's where you are now, because you moved east from us, so now you're the Wicked Witch of the Midwest.
I'm more. Maybe I could just be the mildly rude warlock of the Midwest. Like, I'm not wicked, but like I'm not the nicest person.
Boy, is that the truth. 888-318-7884. Isn't that what you weren't expecting me to agree with you? 888.
You just want my magical flip-flops so you can have all of my mildly rude powers.
I would like that. Yes, I would. I didn't know that was even up for discussion. If there's a possibility of that, I'd like to get those magic flip-flops. 888-318-7884.
The tornado. It's pretty easy out here.
Grace in South Bend, Indiana. What's that in South Bend? Some kind of Catholic school there. Listening on Redeemer Radio.
Notre Dame.
Oh, yeah, Notre Dame. That's right. Glad you're here, Grace. Go ahead with your question.
I've talked with my brother before, and he'll lead me through scenarios, and then he'll say, okay, do you agree that God is outside of time and space? And I'll say, yeah. And then he'll say, then do you agree, like God already knows whether you made it to heaven or hell? And then that's where I'm like, oh, I'm just not certain on that. If God, if He's outside of time and space, like knows if we made it to heaven or hell, and then that brings up questions with me, like then the second coming would have already happened, and yeah, that's my question.
Okay, Grace. Trent?
Yeah, sure. Well, Grace, what I would say there, I would like to answer this question, and I would like to stay as accessible as possible, because the question of God's relationship to time kind of relates to the question of what time is like, which can get very complicated very quickly. If we need to go there, we can. But I would just say that God is all-knowing, right? God is not ignorant. God created the entire universe. He's infinite, perfect being itself. So God is not limited in His power, and He's not limited in His knowledge as well. Therefore, God knows if certain propositions are true or false. For example, there's a proposition, Trent Horn spends eternity with God. And these propositions could be phrased in a temporal or a timeless way. That's where it gets sticky. But I would just say there are truths about whether Trent Horn goes to hell or Trent Horn will go to heaven. God knows those. God is aware of every moment of time because God possesses all of his life in one simultaneous perfect moment. So I believe it was the philosopher Boethius who described eternity as the interminable, perfect, and complete, simultaneous and complete possession of life, of interminable life. So God is eternal, not in the sense of being everlasting. So like we will have endless life. It'll either be with God or apart from God. We have everlasting life. We will live for an endless period of time. But we do not have eternal life in the same way that God is eternal. God is eternal because God possesses all of his infinite life in one perfect moment. God does not change. God is not in time. He's outside of time. So God knows what will happen to us tomorrow, whether we will get on the bus tomorrow or whether we will get hit by the bus tomorrow. And he will know where we will go after we get hit by the bus, whether it's the hospital or another place in the afterlife. So he knows that, but the fact that God knows what will happen, that does not determine what will happen. Our free choices determine what will happen. To make an analogy, and it's a very rough analogy, so it limps, but it's still serviceable. If I am on top of a very high skyscraper and I see two cars traveling at very high speeds, I know that they are going to get into an accident. And then I see them collide. But it doesn't follow the fact that I knew that they were going to collide. My knowledge determined that was going to happen. And so there's something similar with God's knowledge of us, that God does know the future because otherwise he'd be ignorant. The Bible is very clear. He has a plan for us. He predestines us. He has that plan. But his plan takes into account our free choices. This is made clear in paragraph 600 of the Catechism. So that's a start about divine foreknowledge and human freedom. Is there any clarification you would like on that, or how is that as a start?
So God knows what my free will is going to choose in the future?
Yes, there's different ways you can hash that. Yeah,
it sounds like predestination, but it's
sure.
Not.
Well, let me look at it this way, Grace. God knows. He's watching you right now, right? He knows what you're going to do right now. But the fact that he knows what you're doing right now, you're still free to do whatever you want. There is God that moment in his now. It's present in the eternal now, just like tomorrow, what you do tomorrow, what color shirt you're going to wear. It's not like he's looking forward into the future, wondering what you were doing. He sees you in the future, acting in the future, is present as the now for him. It's like he's watching you live in the future. It's happened for God. It just hasn't happened for you yet. But you're still freely acting at that future moment. God observes it, and he knows what you choose to do. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is that the reason God knows what we will do in the future is because when God created the world, he knows not just what we can do or what we will do, he knows what we would do, freely do in any given circumstance. This is called middle knowledge. So he just knows the moment, once the world is created, well, actually a logical, like right before that, logically, not temporally, he knows what we would do in any circumstance. He knows if, if somebody gives me a gift card for Brahms, I'm going to buy a mint chocolate chip ice cream because it's my favorite. He just knows that's what I would do in that circumstance. So God creates the world knowing there are different circumstances. He plans it based on what people would do. They still freely choose. And he is aware of what they freely choose. I don't want to overburden you too much. This can be a very tough subject. But either model you take, you just have to remember that God knows the future, but his knowledge doesn't determine it. Okay? So we are still free to act. He is just not limited in what he knows about what we will do. So I'll throw the life preserver out there again. How is that moving forward a little?
I'm going to listen to the recording of this. I think I'll need some time to absorb it, but
I think that's
Good
fine,
stuff.
Grace. It can be a little tough. So I tell you what, if you could send us your email address, I would love to send you some supplemental articles at Catholic Answers that might break it down a little bit more. But I guess for me, what makes you think, like, if God knows what you're doing tomorrow, are you having a concern about how God knows what you're going to do, or more of a concern like, how am I free if he knows what I'm going to do?
yeah, and I'm also thinking in the long term, like that for certain people they're just fallen people then, and then it's just hard to think about how they aren't determined to that.
They're
but
fallen
that they're
people because
choosing
they
that, and that God
because
knew
they
that.
Okay, so you agree God. So do you think God can know whether we go to heaven or hell? Do you think like that's within his power to know that?
I think after talking with you, yes.
Okay, sure.
But before,
So
I was
let's say he
uncertain.
does
I
have
didn't know
that
if it was,
power.
like our free will as would determine it.
Yeah, our free will determines it, but God knows what we choose to do, either by, let's say he observe, like just like he, and I like that analogy of how I see the traffic on the street from my perspective high up. I see what's going to happen. Something similar with God, that because he's timeless, he sees every moment as if it is the present. And so it's like he knows the future like he knows the present. He just sees it. And so that's how he knows, because we don't see it yet, but he does, and we're freely acting in that moment. So is your concern, I mean, we got a little bit of time here before we close the show out. It seems like you're like, okay, God can know whether we're going to go to heaven or hell. Is your concern like if God knows that like maybe we're kind of destined for one or the other?
Yeah, and it seems like our free will just yeah, I guess I get what you're definitely saying.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
No, that's great, and I'm glad that you're thinking really hard about this, because one of the hardest things to think about is God and time, and when you put the two together, it really stretches your brain. But I think what we can understand is that God knows whether it's heaven or hell. This applies to anything, even if I choose to eat Cheerios or Raisin Bran tomorrow. The question is, does God, knowing I do that? It would be weird if God was sitting next to us and he's in time, and he tells me, hey, here's what you're going to do tomorrow. And I'm like, oh, okay. It seems like it's been fixed. And I know it's just so hard for us. It's hard to think about what our future selves do until we get there. But there is a theory of time that says the past, present, and future are equally real. And the present is a conscious reality we become aware of. But there on this. And so in that case, it may be, oh, wow, if it's all equally real, God just sees it. And my future self, that is me, just at a different time, just like you can have me at a different place, acts, and I'm freely acting at that moment. But give us your email, Grace, and I would be happy to send you some supplementary articles to break this down even more.
Okay, Grace?
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's
All right.
an excellent conversation. Really enjoyed that, and I hope you'll call again, Grace, especially when your brother brings up more stuff. Trent, maybe tell us a little bit about what's coming up at Council of Trent, your podcast, at TrentHornPodcast.com.
Sure. Well, I just released an episode today commenting on Cameron Bertuzzi's conversion to Catholicism and Protestant apologist Gavin Ortland's thoughts on that. So I've just released that. I have a few other episodes coming out this week. For our patrons, you're going to get a sneak peek at the new studio. So you see part of it behind me. I'm kind of still a mystery for now. Mm-hmm. Our patrons will get to see the new studio, and then in the new year, everybody will get to see the brand new Council of Trent studio.
So is that why we got just like a corner right now? Like I'm trying to look around and see if I can see more of it, because
just a corner, just this pinch. I want to wait to make it a bit more dramatic for the reveal.
How much
but
does
it might be here on Catholic Answers Live?
Oh, it
in a
might.
month or so.
Oh, very nice.
I think so. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Trent Horn. Appreciate it. It's always nice talking with you.
Good talking to you as well.
Coming up, Father Tad Baholchik will be here. We haven't had Father Tad on in a while, so I'm looking forward to talking with him. We'll see what's new in the world of biotechnology and what the moral questions are. If you have bioethics questions, give us a call, 888-318-7884. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Our guest, as promised, is Father Tad Pacholczyk from the National Catholic Bioethics Center. Father is a priest of the Diocese of Fall River in Massachusetts, but he lives in Pennsylvania, where the National Catholic Bioethics Center is, and he's the, okay, I'm going to say Director of Education, but is that right? That's right? Director of Education.
That's exactly right.
Father, thanks for being here with us.
Great to be with you, Cy. Glad to join you again.
I think you have lifetime security in your job, given that they keep coming up with new things in the biotechnology fields, and those new things need to be considered from a moral perspective. So,
you're absolutely right. I always tell people I'm never going to be out on the street. I mean, there's just so much happening all the time. And no two days at my job are ever the same. It's awesome. So yeah, I think with the development, the marching on of biotechnology, there are just new twists and turns around every corner.
It's strange that that all of this biotechnology, this flourishing in the biotechnology field. Maybe it's not strange. Maybe this is just the way things happen. But it comes at a time when we are massively varied in our views of what's moral and what's immoral. There's just no consensus on morals at all in our society.
Well, I think that's part of the challenge when we talk about research science, that we have, situations, for example, where scientists are setting up panels that are going to be discussing ethics, trying to figure out things for the future. So, for example, heritable human genome editing. This means you make changes to the genes and they get passed on to your kids and grandkids and great-grandkids. What are the moral issues around that? And there have been some commissions that have been set up. And a lot of times, it's kind of, at least to me, it looks like the old buddy network. In other words, the scientists bring in their ethicist friends who are going to kind of cut them some slack, tell what they want to hear, and that's how the ethics proceeds. It's kind of a almost utilitarian, approach. And so, I agree. There's not a consensus. I think a lot of times important players are left out of the discussion, including the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church has such a well-developed ethical and moral tradition that analyzes these types of questions, and it's essential that we be invited to the table when these kinds of discussions are getting started.
888-318-7884 is the number. If you have questions in the field of bioethics that you'd like to ask Father Tad, you are welcome to call. Maybe that has to do with the treatment of life, treatment of disease in the earliest stages of human life, maybe the latest stages of human life. Maybe it has to do with where you work and maybe moral qualms or questions about the work that's going on where you are. If you have bioethics questions, you're welcome to call. 888-318-7884. Let me just read you a headline that I never thought I'd read, frankly. September on CNN, a synthetic embryo made without sperm or egg could lead to infertility treatments. What happens in the mind of a Catholic priest bioethicist when he reads a headline like that?
Well, you immediately begin to ask some questions. Why is it synthetic? What does that really mean? And is it, in fact, a real embryo that we're talking about? So, the interest here on the part of scientists is that they want to be able to produce something that they can study, that will go through the early steps of development in pretty much the same way as a regular embryo. And they would like to be able to claim, especially if they're doing this with humans, that, it's not actually a full-blown embryo. It's not the real deal, but it's pretty darn close, and we can get a lot of good scientific information out of it. But, the claim that it's not the real deal sometimes isn't carefully vetted. And so I think the danger here is that, like with cloning, cloning produced a real sheep, Dolly the sheep. It was not a fake sheep. It was not a partial sheep.
Right.
It was not other entity. And when you do human cloning, the same thing. You will be producing real human beings. So the question with these synthetic embryos, and just to give you a moment's background on them, the piece about them that's of interest is you can take stem cells and just from the stem cells themselves get an embryo to be developed. Now, you have to do some complicated tricks to make the stem cells behave in this way, because normal stem cells don't do that. They only produce cells and tissues. But scientists are figuring out how to make this happen. And so then the question becomes, all right, if you've got the way to do this, is this a real embryo that you've produced? And the scientists are interested in having it look as much as possible like the full-blown real deal. And so if it's just like cloning, then we have a moral line that immediately pops up when we're talking about human beings, and we got to say, no can do. We cannot be using these embryos. We cannot be producing them in laboratories, etc.
It's a funny use of the word synthetic. It almost seems a little arrogant, frankly, to use the word synthetic in that way, in that we're not actually synthesizing anything. We're just getting what has already been created to behave in a way that it doesn't normally behave. But we haven't actually, it's not like it's made out of plastic or something. It's not a synthetic thing.
Absolutely, you're right. And I mean, this is the interesting piece, that life always comes from pre-existing life. We're never at the point that we're truly sort of throwing a bunch of elements together and, generating life. We're just not doing that. We're just not capable of that. So this is a kind of permutation. It's a little bit of a workaround to get the biology to be more pliable in researchers' hands. But it's not really creating life. It's just doing, a workaround to get to the same starting point, which is, of course, the human embryo.
The number is 888-318-7884. If you have bioethics questions, perfect time for you. Father Tad Pacholczyk, our guest, the Director of Education for the National Catholic Bioethics Center, which you can find at ncbcenter.org. I haven't spoken with you, Father, since the Dobbs decision and the change in the law in the United States regarding abortion. Clearly, lots of good things have happened since then, in that, you just look at the map of the United States and you see that there are much more robust protections in most places, not in every place, but in many, many places, much more robust protections for the unborn. Not perfect, but better. But what are the trends that you're seeing that you as a bioethicist say, well, we need to attend to this, or maybe a point we need to make more clearly in the public sphere that's not being made now?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you ask that, because I was watching a Twitter video the other day from a fundraiser dinner, pro-life fundraiser dinner in Washington, D.C. And pro-abortionists seated a number of people in the audience. I guess they must have purchased tickets ahead of time and came into this dinner. And then at certain points they stood up and protested. And it was interesting to listen to the protests of one or two of them. One of them said, well, this is going to mean that women can't get good health care. When abortion is illegal, then women are going to be, dying and so on. And I think that's become a kind of clarion call on their part. It's become a rallying cry to say that somehow women will be neglected. And I think there's a special emphasis here suggesting that it's going to be in Catholic facilities. Yeah. That if you have a complicated pregnancy and you show up at a Catholic hospital, that you're not going to get the kind of care that's appropriate. And, that, of course, is false. That is a claim that gains traction, pulls on the emotional strings quite a bit. But the reality is that when you go to a Catholic hospital, you are able to receive the full range of appropriate treatments for your condition, even in complicated pregnancies. But there won't be any cases in which a decision will be made to end the life of one human being to benefit another. There will be, potential conflicts and situations where you'll have to intervene. And in some of those cases, by the principle of double effect, it will be allowable to give the mother a treatment that will have the unintended but tolerated effect of the loss of the child's life as a secondary effect. And, that depends on the details of the case. But, to give you just one simple example that's used quite a bit against the church, if a woman's water breaks and she does get an infection after her water breaks, that can be a very dangerous situation. But in that situation, if she goes to a Catholic hospital and they verify that in fact she has an infection, because just because your water breaks, it's not a guarantee that you'll get infected. Many pregnancies can continue without that infection arising. But if you do have the infection and it's fulminating and it's not possible to control it using antibiotics or other appropriate means, it would be permissible in a Catholic hospital to do something called an early induction of labor to clear out the infected membranes that are threatening the life of both the mother and the child. Now, the secondary effect will be that baby will die after delivery, some few minutes after delivery, probably, if it's a premature baby, very premature. If it's later in the pregnancy, of course, you would do that and hope to save both of them. So that's an example of where the principle of double effect allows for OBGYNs in a Catholic hospital to properly and directly address the particulars of a complicated maternal fetal conflict situation, and that would be the kind of care that would be available in other non-Catholic hospitals as well.
The number again is 888-318-7884. Father Tad Pacholczyk, our guest from the National Catholic Bioethics Center. I actually have been surprised at how often things are said as if they are just facts. Like you go to a Catholic hospital with a miscarriage, or then you're going to be, you're not going to be treated or you're not going to receive the treatment. Ectopic pregnancies, people have said, and I've known myself several Catholic women who had ectopic pregnancies who received the same care that any woman would receive in a Catholic hospital from Catholic doctors. So it strikes me that there's either, and I do think in many cases, there are pro-life people, even in the news media, who actually don't know the Catholic position. They should probably know it. They should inform them, but they don't know. But some of it does also seem disingenuous. Now, I won't ask you to make an evaluation about that, but when you hear these things, like that women who are suffering miscarriage are going to be mistreated or not well treated, or ectopic pregnancies, these seem to be things that the Catholic Church has been in its hospitals able to deal with just fine up till now.
That's absolutely true. I mean, the hospitals have been providing this care for decades and decades. And of course, those on the other side are looking for opportunities to find specific examples where they can say that a woman's health was neglected when she presented herself to a Catholic hospital. But a lot of times when you dig into the details of it, either the Catholic hospital, some of the people there didn't actually know what was allowable, morally speaking. I've seen that, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Or it's just a case of incorrect labeling of what the Catholic hospital can do, and they are able to receive the appropriate treatments. So, I mean, I think the key principle here to remember always that we need to emphasize, and I understand why some of these cases are complex. When you look at the kind of mysterious interconnectedness of a mother and her child in the womb, and how certain things are shared and certain other things don't go across the placenta and so on. You have a very kind of delicate balance, and it's complicated sometimes to sort out even which tissues belong to which individual. But at the end of the day, the Church approaches these matters with great clarity and says there are always two patients who are present to you when a pregnant woman comes. At least two. If she's carrying twins or triplets, then you have multiple patients in front of you. And the Church seeks to provide care to all the patients who are present in that situation, and not to instrumentalize, that's the big word we use, not to instrumentalize one for the advantage of another. In other words, targeting one for demise for the benefit of the other, or to serve the interests of the other. That's going to represent bad medicine at its core, and runs counter to the Hippocratic Oath itself, which is pre-Christian.
Indeed it is. 888-318-7884, the number. Another area that you might want to talk with Father Tad about, which I had neglected, because many people do have questions about the bioethics involved in transgender surgeries and treatments, those kinds of things. It's all welcome. You're welcome to call and ask your question. Often on this program, you'll hear an apologist say something like, well, I'm not sure about the science, or I don't know about the specifics of these particular things. Well, in general, Father Tad will know those things, so you can get very specific answers if you have questions in that regard. 888-318-7884.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
Do you love sharing the gospel and want to learn to be more effective? Join the St. Paul Street Evangelization online School of Evangelization. You will learn to build bridges of trust and make disciples by befriending strangers, proclaiming the gospel, inviting people to the church, and praying with others. We'll ask for a pledge of financial support, but if you are unable to give, we'll give you a membership at no cost. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Father Tad Pacholczyk, our guest. The number, 888-318-7884. If you've got a question for Father Tad, you're very welcome to call, 888-318-7884. I am obliged to tell you the following before we go back to any phones, however. You can use the promo code MyDeal22 right now to get an extra 20% off on top of any other savings you get at shop.catholic.com. That's an extra 20% off your already discounted purchase at shop.catholic.com. And if your purchase goes over $75 and you live in the United States, your shipping's free. Shop.catholic.com. The number here is 888-318-7884. We're taking your bioethics questions, whether it's a question involving your own family or your own health. That's perfectly welcome. 888-31-TRUTH, or maybe something that's in the news that you'd like to get the Catholic perspective on. 888-318-7884. I kind of threw it out there about the transgender stuff, and I was asking you at the break, but you're answering a lot of questions around transgenderism these days.
It's really the case. It's amazing how much interest there is, and I think people are they're encountering it, especially in school settings, where the question of, will there be some students who are transitioning who are going to appear in the classroom, and what are the expectations that are being put forward by school systems, especially public school systems, but also Catholic school systems are grappling with this as well. And, the whole area of pronouns, and there's just so much going on. It's really a challenging area, I think, for people to wade into.
I think one of the particular challenges is that there's this kind of obvious statistical explosion of claims of transgenderism among teenage or preteen girls that people are saying, well, doesn't that suggest to you something other than just that this is maybe a natural phenomenon that we had previously suppressed knowledge of, and something else is going on here? Do you have that sense?
I do. I think, in the past, the whole medical establishment, when it looked at transgender, the majority of the cases were men who wanted to transition and become women. And that really was the case, from the earliest times. And very recently, the numbers, the statistics, as you've hinted at, have flipped on that. And it is now the majority women, girls, who are wanting to transition and to become males. So this is a striking phenomenon that there's been this incredible flip-flop. And it does raise the question, is there the potential here for a kind of social reinforcement that is gaining traction and really taking off full speed? And I suspect very strongly that this is the case, that young girls are, going through puberty. I always tell people going through puberty is a tough thing. It's tough. It was tough for most of us, figuring out our place in the world, figuring out how we relate to other people, dealing with questions of our own sexuality. It was all tough, and it's still tough. And maybe it's more tough now as kids grow up. And, I think when in a very porn-saturated society, you have certain expectations for girls and women, and there's pressure, there to conform that may be hard for some people. And you also have this other angle, which is that when you do something like declare that you're going to transition, imagine if you're sort of not noticed very much at your school, and suddenly you come out and say this. Suddenly you become the center point, the focus of everybody's attention. And, that on its own may be kind of appealing to a young person who's struggling to find, their place in society, or even just at the society of the local school.
A bunch of folks on the phone for you, Father, so I'm going to go to the phones if that's all right with you.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll go to Carolyn in upstate New York, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Carolyn, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Father Tad Pacholczyk.
Hello, Father Tad. Thanks for taking my question. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
It says to turn on the radio, but I don't know how else to talk to you through my car phone. So, your comment about the synthetic embryo and not being able to make, how can they say where they're making a living embryo from a non-living tissue? So, in the question and the controversy about the stem cell lines, I've heard many callers call in on other shows saying, well, it really wasn't it wasn't alive. It was just a cell line. But I had read, and it may have even been your reading, that said, you can't make a living cell line from non-living tissue. So that had to have been like a planned abortion so that the researchers could be right there to take the baby, get the living tissue, start the cell line. So can you comment on that? And then secondly, if that really is the truth, and I want to be able to say that if I have conversations with people, I want to be sure I'm correct in that. How do we present a consistent position if we say, well, it happened a long time ago, so we might as well just use it? I feel like just avoid it at all costs, because we'll never convince the researchers to use a different method, like, umbilical blood cells and everything, to make those cell lines, as opposed to taking aborted tissue. Thank you.
Father?
Yeah, great question, Carolyn. I think, first, to just clarify about getting a cell line, because there's two different things here that a lot of people, including a lot of Catholics, get confused about. One would be stem cells. The other would be a cell line. Cell lines, for example, are used to make vaccines. Stem cells are not used to make vaccines. Stem cells are used for other types of research. And for the most part, they are not used for vaccine production. So with the whole vaccine controversy, people were saying, well, where do these cell lines come from? And because they're alive, which you pointed out correctly, they're living cells. They propagate. You can continue to grow them in the laboratory as long as you feed them and take care of them. They did come from the corpse of a deceased baby. The description by researchers, if you go back to the original papers, they indicate that these were obtained after an abortion. And what basically happened was a researcher showed up at the door of an abortion clinic or a hospital that was doing an abortion, and they said, do you have any fresh cadavers here? And it turns out that kidneys are one of the last organs to undergo degradation in your body. And so they end up being very useful for getting cells after somebody has died or after a baby has died. You can remove kidneys and get cells that will give you then a cell line.
Can we just hang on for just a quick second while we take a break, Father, and we'll come back and you can continue with Carolyn's question?
Absolutely.
Carolyn, I hope you can hang on. We have to do this break. We'll take a quick break and be right back with more with Father Tad Pacholczyk on bioethics right after this on Catholic Answers Live. The recent decision by the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade was a monumental victory for the pro-life movement. But the fight is far from over. With our new booklet, Why We're Pro-Life, we have produced the perfect tool to prepare you to have peaceful and convincing conversations to shed light on the truth about human life from conception to natural death. Catholic Answers is printing millions of copies of this booklet, and we plan simply to give them away. You can help us in two ways. First, by generously supporting this project. 25 cents prints one book. $2,500 prints 10,000, and so on. Second, by helping us distribute the booklet through your parish, your school, or the pro-life ministry you work with. Catholic Answers is going to blanket the country with Why We're Pro-Life, but only if you step up and help us. Thank you so much. For more information, visit whyweareprolife.com.
Want to know more about the origins of the Catholic Church? Joe Heschmeyer explores the beginnings of Christianity in The Early Church Was the Catholic Church. Joe digs deep into the words and actions of those who lived right after the apostles to refute anti-Catholic claims of how the faith was lived back then. Order your copy of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
As Catholic apologetics have gotten stronger, Protestant responses have gotten stronger as well. And now they have their own answers to rebut the standard Catholic proofs. Don't fret, we've got you covered. In his new book, Meeting the Protestant Response, apologist Carlo Broussard gives well-reasoned biblical answers to Protestant comebacks. Order your copy of Meeting the Protestant Response today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you. Father Tad Pacholczyk, our guest this hour. Your calls welcome, 888-318-7884. And if you've listened for long, you know that Father Tad is with the National Catholic Bioethics Center, where he's the Director of Education. And Carolyn in New York is on the line with a question about stem cells and cell lines. And Father, you were in the midst of an answer about which can be used, which can't be used.
Yes, so the notion that cell lines come from abortions, that is true sometimes. You can also get cell lines from other cells, like from circumcision tissue that's been left over, or just when somebody has a typical routine surgery, you could even use some of those cells that are left over to make a cell line. But I think the important point, and Carolyn was kind of driving at this, she was saying, well, isn't it the case that the baby is still alive when they take out these cells? And the short answer is no. What happens is this is a corpse, but as our bodies decay after we die, some of the tissues and organs take a little bit longer to decay. And I mentioned the kidney. So the kidney has been used to make a cell line. It's called HEK293. And that cell line was very important in the development of various vaccines during COVID and also for other vaccine work as well. So that's the cell line story. It does not require that the baby be alive. It can be a corpse, and it is typically a corpse. Meanwhile, stem cells do require a living human. and you have to make the decision that I'm going to kill this living embryo that's in front of me, this living human being, in order to get the stem cells. So it is it's coterminous. The isolation of the cells is coterminous with the killing of the human. Happens at exactly the same time. And basically what you do is you pour some chemicals onto these embryos, and these chemicals digest the embryo into its individual cells, and the embryo no longer exists. And then you get your stem cells out of that. So that involves a much more serious objection that you have to kill in order to obtain these. Meanwhile, the abortion case, somebody else did the killing. And of course, that's wrong, completely wrong in itself. But you showed up afterwards and said, are there any corpses here that I can rate? Now, we shouldn't be using those for research either. And I think Carolyn was getting at that, pointing that out, which is also correct. We need to develop alternative cell lines from some of those other sources that I mentioned. And the Church has emphasized that in numerous documents going all the way back to the early 2000s.
That all makes sense to you, Carolyn?
It does. I said this one caller had called in and said, well, it could have just been a spontaneous miscarriage. It wasn't necessarily, a chosen abortion. But I've had 3 miscarriages, and they tell you your baby's heart has stopped. Go home, and in 3 or couple days, you will have the miscarriage. So, I think that's disingenuous to say, I don't really know what it means. There has to be some coordination between, okay, I know there's going to be, and it bothers me that we have said, well, it's still okay to use it, even though, because the Vatican, I know, had some vaccines and Sanofi had some vaccines, and I don't know if there's enough encouragement for them to continue to make vaccines that are not tainted by abortion if we just say, well, it's already there, we'll just use this anyway.
Father? I'm sorry. Father, go ahead with your response to Carolyn.
Yeah, I think she's raising a good point about, how much incentive is there for pharmaceuticals companies, big pharma, to change the way they do their business. And this is where it really does get important for us as believers to contact them and say, hey, when the next pandemic comes up, don't just turn to these cell lines that came out of abortions. There are plenty of alternatives out there. At the beginning, as you're planning the whole project, make sure you don't produce the vaccine using any of those problematic cell lines, and don't test the vaccine in ways that rely on those. And to the extent that the big pharma hears from us, this actually is something of concern to them. There was a whistleblower who was in, I think it was maybe in Merck or one of the other big ones, and released some documents that indicated internal discussions that were taking place at Big Pharma when the news was getting more and more airtime that vaccines were being produced by relying on cell lines from abortions. So it is partly, the consumer has to push here, and because there's going to be a lot of times expediency on the part of Big Pharma. They just want to get things done. They're going to use the standard cell lines that everybody has been using for a long time. They're not going to want to do the hard work of shifting into a slightly different system in order to make the new vaccines.
Carolyn, thank you very, very much. All the lines are full, so I got to keep moving, but a very helpful discussion, and appreciate the call and the questions. I'm going to go to Tallahassee, Florida now. Javier, listening in Tallahassee on YouTube. Javier, go ahead with your question for Father Tad Pacholczyk.
Hello. Well, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
And my question is how to respond to pro-choice philosophers who bite the bullet on like basically human life depending on consciousness, like Peter Singer. That like he basically says that human life depends on consciousness to the point that since infants don't really have a robust consciousness, that doesn't mean they have value.
Okay, Javier, that's a good question. You're right that this is a theme that it kind of circles back over and over. And I think the the way I try to look at this and to kind of encapsulate it for people is to say, what matters is whether you're talking about the kind of entity that is able to develop consciousness. Is it that kind of entity or not? Because not all entities are capable of that. And once you have an entity that has that inherent capability, you are talking about a human being, a being that is human, that is sacrosanct, that is deserving of unconditional protection. And, you know, it's by the very structure of the entity that you owe that respect to it. So whether at that particular moment it's able to manifest consciousness doesn't matter. Because it would be like saying, well, the only thing that matters is if you're able to balance your checkbook. And it's like, well, wait, you know, newborns can't balance checkbooks yet. And even 3-year-olds can't balance checkbooks yet. But are they the kind of being that is capable of balancing a checkbook? Of course they are. And that's the beauty of their real being. That, you know, that's the dynamism that we have to safeguard, so that that full potential that is there is safeguarded and not cut off, you know, in a violent way through abortion or other approaches like embryonic stem cell research.
Javier, thank you very much. It makes me nervous. I don't think I would pass the balancing the checkbook test. I think there's a lot of adults who might not, but I appreciate that question, Javier. I'm just moving on because we do have full lines at the moment. Mike in Michigan, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Mike, go ahead with your question for Father.
Yeah, hi, Father. I'm not sure I'd pass the balance the checkbook test either, but thank you for taking my call. With regard to the COVID vaccine, I know some people that were reluctant or didn't want to get it because they believed it altered their DNA, and they felt it was transhumanistic, or they were participating in transhumanism. And I will say I'm not sure I fully understand transhumanism or whether there's any linkage to the COVID vaccine, and I'm just wondering if you could comment on that.
Yeah, sure. I think that this was one of these myths that kind of gained a foothold during COVID, which was the idea that if you get an mRNA vaccine, it alters your DNA in a kind of permanent fashion and makes modifications that are going to be passed on to your kids and grandkids. And that is not correct. That's not how mRNA vaccines work. They produce, a protein from the RNA which triggers your immune system to get activated. That's basically how they work. And they don't go in and start, altering your chromosomes, etc. Now, I know that there was 1 or 2 papers, and I've had people send me these papers that say, oh, well, it's possible to demonstrate that there may be some tiny level of what's called reverse transcription back into the DNA. But the reality is that is not likely to be a mechanism that is part in any measurable way of typical vaccine introduction. So this is not, and it's certainly not something that even if it did occur, you get injected into your muscle or your arm, that this is not the sort of thing that alters your ability to hand on DNA to your children and grandchildren. So the claims here about transhumanism, that you are changing our human nature by getting vaccinated in a way that's permanent for the whole future of mankind, it's simply an exaggeration. It's not correct.
Mike, that brings us to the break, so I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very, very much for the question. We'll take this break, be right back with more bioethics questions for Father Tad Pacholczyk right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
It's all about the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
EWTN offers listeners and viewers the daily readings to enable you to accompany the Mass of the day. Our Catholic daily readings include the readings of the day, along with online videos. It's a great resource for all who desire to live a life of faith that is pleasing to our Lord. Visit EWTN.com and click Catholicism. EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. And today we welcomed back Father Tad Pacholczyk, who we have not seen in a while. And it's very nice to have you back, Father. I really enjoy having you on the program. Father is a scientist and an ethicist and a Catholic priest. So he's the guy we want to talk to when we... what kind of scientist are you? You're like a brain scientist, right?
Right, neuroscientist. Yeah, that was my training.
Yeah. Simple people call it brain scientists. You fancy guys call it neuroscientists.
You're right.
Marie in Rhode Island is watching on Facebook. Marie, thanks for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Father Tad Pacholczyk.
Hello, Father Tad. I had met you about 8 years ago at Bryant University in Smithfield, Rhode Island at one of our catechetical Saturdays.
Wow, you don't have any accent at all from Rhode Island, Marie. I'm teasing you. I said you don't have any accent at all because you sound quite like the Rhode Islander, maybe even a Massachusettser.
Oh yes. I'm a Canuck. I'm a French Canadian.
Oh. Well, we're glad to have you here. Yeah, go ahead with your question for Father. Go ahead, Marie.
Yes, my son Joshua, who is autistic, an adult man, he can't wrap himself around the homosexual transgender thing. He's asking me to ask you, what causes homosexuality? Is it, DNA? Is it, are they born with it? Is it a social, cultural thing? Is it a choice? And the same thing for transgenderism.
I'm going to let Father answer, but I just realized who you are, Marie. You're an old friend of ours here at Catholic Answers. You've been around.
I am.
Oh, I'm so happy to talk with you, Marie.
I've been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Me too. I don't call often. I just listen a lot of times in chat.
Well, I did. For some reason, I didn't make the connection, Marie, with our old friend. But I'm glad you're here. So, Father, how might you help Marie's son?
Yeah. Well, Marie, it's neat to reconnect with you again after 8 years or so. I do remember speaking at Bryant, that engagement that you mentioned. So, I mean, your question here is, you've pointed out in asking the question a number of variables. And I think you've listed what are believed to be potential contributors. In other words, there's not one cause and effect, simple, linear answer to your question. Some people would like to say, are they born that way? It's automatically you're born that way, and so it's genetic, kind of hardwired. Well, no, it's not hardwired. We know that because identical twins who have the same identical genes, you only have a shared, what's called concordance between same-sex attraction for them in less than 50% of the cases. So there are clearly environmental factors, which you alluded to. There may be some social factors. There may be some cases in which there are elements of trauma that will have, contributory role. And the list, could be expanded. So it's not clear really what is at the origins or genesis of homosexuality. And it's a similar answer for gender dysphoria, for this sense of ambiguity about who a person is, or a strong feeling that they are actually the opposite sex. So the same types of variables that we mentioned, there may be, when I say that it's not strictly genetic, that doesn't mean that there won't be potentially some element of genes somewhere that contributes in the pathway or in the tributary to making a person have same-sex attractions. But at the moment, we don't have clear candidates for that. The research is still ongoing. And those things are likely only to represent predispositions. In other words, they're not hardwired, kind of set in stone, but may strengthen a particular leaning that an individual may be experiencing personally. So, in other words, the answer is a complicated one. We don't know fully the causal reasons, either for gender dysphoria or for same-sex attraction.
Okay, Marie?
Okay, one more question, if I may. Yes, are they still studying for answers to that, to those questions I had?
Yes, Marie, absolutely. Researchers are looking into this on an ongoing basis. It's a complicated question. For example, if you want to ask the question, could the hormonal environment within the uterus affect how a baby develops and maybe have that baby grow up and have a propensity to same-sex attraction? There's a lot of variables that you've got to map out there before you can actually trace it all the way back to those hormones in the uterus. But researchers are working on that and asking, intelligent questions and seeking to understand cause and effect as best they can.
Thanks, Marie. I'm going to keep moving to try to get everybody that's on the lines on the air with Father, but it's nice to talk with you again, Marie. Loretta in Lake Stevens, Washington, listening to EWTN on Channel 130 Sirius XM satellite radio. Loretta, please go ahead with your question for Father Tad Pacholczyk.
Hi, I really appreciate you taking my call. My doctor wants me to start taking the Humira pen for my rheumatoid arthritis. And the information he gave me says that biologics are derived from living substances such as human and animal cells. What do you know about these cells, especially the human part?
Okay. That's we do get a certain number of questions like yours, where people are wondering about particular drugs that they've been prescribed, and do they have any connection to cell lines derived from abortions. This is actually a huge field, and we don't track all the individual pharmaceuticals ourselves. So what I want to do is recommend that you get in touch with a group called Children of God for Life. They have a website, and you can check with them. They track more closely which pharmacological agents do rely on cell lines that have a connection back to abortion, and they might be able to tell you specifically for the drug you're mentioning, Humira. Was it Humira? That
right.
Whether that has the human, you may have cell lines from humans that are not from abortions, which would not raise any problems, but whether cell lines derived from abortions were used in production or in testing, I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay, and that was Children of God for Life, and then it's probably a .org or...
Yes, I think it's Children of God for Life, yeah. Or it might be COG4life.org, if I remember. Yeah.
Loretta, COG4life.org. Darren says yes, that's it. COG4life.org. Thanks, Loretta. If it sounds like I'm going quick, I'm just trying to go quick to get everybody who wants to talk to Father on. We're talking about bioethics with Father Tad Pacholczyk from the National Catholic Bioethics Center. If you run up against these challenging questions, you can always visit ncbcenter.org, ncbcenter.org. Addie in Michigan watching on YouTube, you are up next. Go ahead, Addie, with your question for Father.
Hi, Father. Thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to ask you, because I've talked to a few different priests in my area about this, but I'm someone who suffers from gender dysphoria, and I transitioned 6 years ago. During that transition, I became interested in the Catholic Church, and now I'm just wondering if I do choose to join the Church, would I have to detransition to join the Catholic Church?
That is a good question. To join the church, I'm not sure that you would, immediately have to, but I think the issue of making a determination on your part that you are not going to remain in the state of transitioning and seek to respect and return to your native sexuality, that decision somewhere does need to be a part of your journeying towards the fullness of the truth. So the question of when one would have to do that, maybe not before starting RCIA, or it would depend on the particular situation that you're dealing with this. But in the long run, this would indeed be part of the journey, that one could not, assuming that you're in a situation where there's a freely made choice originally to move in the transgender direction, then you would need to move back to the more integral and complete and correct view of your own person and humanity there. So that's I can't answer it specifically for RCIA in all cases, but eventually that would be required.
Okay, well, I think you appreciate for the clarification.
Well, thank you, Addie. It's as you're considering coming into the Catholic Church, if you'd like, we have a little book called The Words of Eternal Life, True Happiness and Where to Find It by our own Jimmy Akin. We'd be happy to send that to you if you'd like it. And if more questions come up, we'd love to talk with you again. That's what we're here for. If you want to email us, you can always email us at radio@catholic.com. I think I have time to get more on, but I'm going to give it a try. Addie, just hang on the line if you'd like that book. Loretta in Lake Stevens, Washington, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. You're going to have to be quick if you'd like an answer from Father Tad Pacholczyk.
I was already on. I'm still listening to the radio.
Oh, Loretta, I went to the wrong. I'm sorry. Consuelo, you are on next. Can you be quick with your question for Father?
Yes, it wasn't a question, Father. But anyway, what I wanted to... Hi, Father Tad, you're Polish. I wanted to say when I studied at the University of Portland, and it was several years ago, it was Human Development and Learning, and this was a required course. And it was normal. They were explaining to us that in human development and learning, whether it's a boy or a girl, there's a stage where they go through an attraction to the same sex. And then it ends, and they just continue going on, or else the boy, the same thing. And I'm thinking, doesn't anybody remember this? Didn't anybody learn that when they were going through graduate school on this and that? And I'm thinking, some of these doctors are dodo birds, because nobody seems to be mentioning this at all.
Father, I'm going to, just because there's only 30 seconds left, I'll have to get a response from you.
Yeah, well, I think that's maybe a quick way, a shorthand to remind us of the complexity of sorting out our sense of sexual attraction. But yes, I mean, I think there is a kind of spectrum that can affect people as they go through early sexual development, as they're trying to figure out their place. It's kind of a generic answer, but I think that's true.
But we didn't leave you much time, Father. Consuelo, thank you. I'm sorry that we didn't have more time for that. I do want to get a comment on, is she correct that you're Polish?
Yes, my name is a Polish name, and my dad was from Warsaw.
Oh, I didn't even know. Very cool. So you're a second generation American. Father, may we have your blessing before we go?
Absolutely. May Almighty God bless you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Father Tad Pacholczyk is our guest. You can find him at fathertad.com. You can also go to NCB Center. That's the website of the National Catholic Bioethics Center, ncbcenter.org. Father, I'm so glad we've connected again. I hope we'll do more of this in the coming year.
Me too. Thanks so much, Cy. Just great to be with you.
We'll see you next time, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.